Hello, I'm Peter. I'm so glad you could join me for tonight's journey. In the midst of this hurried pace of life, has your heart ever been suddenly filled with a sense of absence, as if we are longing for a rhythm that never truly belonged to us? A time when joy was shared through a gaze, connection was nurtured by the fireside, and relaxation was simply being silent together. We live now in an age of abundance, endless entertainment at our fingertips, infinite voices calling for our attention. And yet, in all this noise, something feels lost, something essential. Perhaps it's the knowledge that once, not so long ago, people gathered not because an algorithm told them to, but because the sun had set and the fire was warm and there was nowhere else they needed to be. Tonight, I want to take you somewhere quiet, somewhere slow, not to escape the present, but to remember what it means to be human when the distractions fall away. We often think of the past in terms of lack, but here's a more fascinating truth. In every era of history, humans have invented the entertainment software to match the hardware of their lives. For them, a perfect evening didn't require Wi-Fi or Netflix. Entertainment and connection were found in the most fundamental sounds. The cheerful crackle of the hearth fire, the warm rhythm of family breathing close by, and the melodic music of the wind playing around the house. They transformed what we might see as hardship into the very fabric of their joy. This is where we're going, to a village, medieval, modest, forgettable in the grand sweep of history, but unforgettable in the small truths it holds about what it means to pass the hours when there's nothing to pass them with but each other. What did they do for fun? How did they endure the weight of days that all looked the same? How did they survive boredom itself, when boredom was not a gap between activities, but the very texture of existence? These aren't trivial questions, because in asking them, we're really asking, what does it mean to be content? What does it mean to belong? What does it mean to find joy, not in novelty, but in repetition, in ritual, in the faces of the same people around the same fire, night after night after night? You might think this will be a story about suffering, about dirt and disease and hardship. And yes, those things were real. But that's not the whole story. Because the people we're about to meet, they didn't spend every moment in misery. They laughed. They played. They fell in love in clumsy, earnest ways. They found meaning in the smallest gestures. A song sung badly, a joke told poorly, a hand held in the dark. And maybe, just maybe, they understood something we've forgotten. So settle in. Let your breath slow. There's no rush. We have all night. And in this quiet hour, I'll walk with you through a day in that village, from the reluctant dawn to the slow unwinding of dusk, from the mundane to the sacred, from the tedious to the transcendent. And if, somewhere in the listening, you feel a strange comfort, a sense that you've been here before, in some life you never lived, well, that's because you have. We all have. Because this story isn't about them. It's about us, about the human heart and how it beats the same whether the century is the 11th or the 21st. Think about it for a moment. In our modern world, we complain about boredom as if it's some great injustice. We reach for our phones the moment there's a lull in conversation. We panic if we're left alone with our thoughts for more than a few minutes. We've built entire industries around the promise of never being bored. But what if boredom isn't the enemy? What if it's actually the crucible in which community is forged? What if the long, slow, repetitive hours are precisely what force us to turn toward each other, to create entertainment from nothing, to find wonder in the mundane? And perhaps that's the secret we've forgotten, that sometimes the point isn't to be entertained. Sometimes the point is simply to be together, breathing the same air, sharing the same space, knowing that tomorrow will come and we'll do it all again. So, take my hand, close your eyes, and let's go back, not to learn history, but to remember what it feels like to be alive when life moves at the speed of breath, not the speed of light. The year doesn't matter. Pick any year between 1100 and 1400 and the scene would be much the same. The place doesn't matter either. Any village in England, France, the German states, the Low Countries, they all had their particularities, their local customs, their regional differences. But at the fundamental level, they all operated on the same principles. Work until your body protests. Rest because you must. Find joy in the cracks between exhaustion. Our village, let's say it's in England, somewhere in the Midlands perhaps, far enough from London that news travels slowly and royal decrees feel abstract, close enough to a market town that there's some connection to the wider world, but not so close that the village loses its insularity. There's a manor house, of course, stone, with actual glass in some of the windows, which marks it as a place of relative wealth. The lord is absent more often than not, off dealing with affairs that the villagers neither understand nor particularly care about. The steward manages things in his absence, which mostly means collecting rents and settling disputes and making sure the lord's interests are protected. Then there's the church, small, draughty, with walls that have stood for 2 centuries and will stand for 2 more. The priest is Father Eldred, a man who came to the village as a young curate and simply never left. He's forgotten more Latin than most priests ever knew, but he remembers the important parts. He baptizes babies, buries the dead, and on Sundays delivers sermons that are less about theology and more about practical morality. Don't steal. Don't lie. Be kind to your neighbor. Love God. It's not sophisticated, but it works. The village itself is a collection of perhaps 30 households, give or take, depending on the season and whether the plague has visited recently. Most of the houses are single-room affairs, with walls of wattle and daub, roofs of thatch, and floors of packed earth. The richer peasants might have a loft where the children sleep, or a separate space for the animals. The poorer ones make do with corners and curtains, and the understanding that privacy is a luxury they can't afford. Between the houses run paths that turn to rivers of mud when it rains, and clouds of dust when it doesn't. There's a well at the center of the village, and a mill by the stream, and a smithy that serves 3 villages, and is therefore perpetually busy. There's an ale house, or rather, there are several ale houses, because any woman who brews a decent batch can hang a bush over her door and call it a tavern for a week. The fields surround the village like a patchwork quilt. There's the common land, where everyone can graze their animals. There are the strips each family works, scattered across different fields, in a system that seems chaotic, but actually ensures that everyone gets their fair share of good soil and bad, low ground and high. And beyond the fields, there's the forest. Not the romantic forest of fairy tales, but the working forest. The place where you gather wood and hunt for mushrooms, and try very hard not to think about the fact that it's dark and deep and full of things that might want to eat you. This is the world we're entering. Not a world of knights and castles and courtly love, though those things exist somewhere for someone. This is the world of everyone else. The 90% who will never be written about in chronicles or sung about in ballads. The people who get up every morning and work and eat and sleep, and somehow, in between all of that, manage to live. Their names were English names, because this is England. Aelfric and Edgith and Oswald and Cinneberg. Names that sound strange to us now, but were as common then as John and Mary are today. Names that carried no particular meaning beyond the fact that they'd been in the family for generations, and it seemed unlucky to change them. They spoke English too, though an English that would be nearly incomprehensible to us. The vowels were different, the consonants harder. The vocabulary was smaller, but more precise. They had a dozen words for different kinds of rain, and only vague concepts for things like privacy or boredom. Their language reflected their world, concrete, sensory, grounded in the immediate and the tangible. And they lived according to rhythms that had nothing to do with clocks. Because clocks, mechanical timekeepers that divide the day into equal hours, those don't exist yet. Not here. Time is told by the sun and the church bells, and the feeling in your body that says it's time to eat, or time to sleep, or time to work again. So when I tell you we're starting at dawn, I don't mean 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. or any particular time. I mean the moment when darkness begins to thin, when the rooster decides it's time to crow, when the first person in the village opens their eyes and thinks, with varying degrees of enthusiasm, here we go again. That's where we'll begin, with the opening of eyes, with the reluctant return to consciousness, with the knowledge that today will be much like yesterday and tomorrow will be much like today. And that's both the curse and the comfort of this life. Are you ready? Then let's start walking through the mud and the cold and the slowly brightening sky, past the houses where smoke is just beginning to curl from the roof holes, past the church where Father Ealdred is already awake, because priests keep different hours, past the fields where nothing is growing yet, but the promise of spring hovers like a prayer. Let's enter the world where time moves differently, where a day can feel like a year, and a year can pass like a day, where nothing much happens, and yet everything that matters happens, where people live and love and die, in the same small space, generation after generation, and somehow find meaning in the repetition. This is their story, or rather, their day. One single day, stretched out and examined, and held up to the light. Shall we begin? The rooster doesn't want to crow. You can almost feel his reluctance, standing there in the pre-dawn murk, feathers fluffed against the cold. The world is still dark, still sleeping, and he knows, with whatever passes for knowledge in a rooster's small brain, that once he starts, everything else will follow. The waking, the working, the long, slow drag of another day. But habit is stronger than desire. His throat opens, the sound breaks the silence, like a stone thrown into still water. And the ripples begin. Inside the houses, wrapped in wool and the warmth of other bodies, people stir. Not quickly. Nothing happens quickly at this hour. There's a groan from someone whose back aches from the thin straw mattress. A child whimpers, half dreaming. A dog stretches, yawns, settles back down. No one leaps from bed. That would be foolish, because the air outside the cocoon of shared heat is cruel. It bites, and the floor, packed earth worn smooth by generations of feet, is cold enough to shock the souls awake in an instant. So they lie there a moment longer, listening to the rooster's second call, louder now, more insistent, to the shuffle of the neighbor's door opening, to the distant clang of a bucket against stone as someone else, braver or more desperate, begins the day. The smell is the first thing that grounds you. Smoke, always smoke, from fires that never quite die. Damp wool, bodies unwashed because water is scarce and winter is harsh. The faint, sour note of old straw and the warm, earthy musk of animals sleeping nearby. It's not unpleasant once you're used to it. It's simply the smell of life, unfiltered. And then, finally, movement. A man sits up, careful not to disturb his wife, though she's already awake and pretending not to be. He reaches for his tunic, feels the rough weave, the slight dampness it never quite loses in this season. He pulls it over his head, grimacing as the cold fabric touches his skin. His breath fogs the air. His name is Wolfgar. He's 35, which makes him neither young nor old by the standards of his time. His hands are calloused from years of working the plough. His face is weathered from years of working under the sun. He has 3 children, though he started with 5. 2 were taken by fever in their first year, and he tries not to think about them too much, because thinking doesn't bring them back. Outside, the village is waking in slow motion. Doors creak open, footsteps squelch in the mud. The soundscape of dawn is not dramatic. It's subtle. The kind of quiet where you can hear individual things. The crackle of kindling catching flame, the low murmur of someone muttering a morning prayer, the wet cough of an old man who's had that cough for as long as anyone can remember. That old man is Eadwulf. He's past 70, which makes him an oddity. Most people don't make it this far, but Eadwulf has survived plague and famine, and a kick from a horse that should have killed him, but only left him with a limp. He sits by his door every morning, coughing and watching the village wake up, and people have stopped asking if he's all right, because clearly he's not, but clearly he's also not dying anytime soon. There's Bessie, the cow, shifting her weight in the stall that shares a wall with the family's sleeping space. She's been holding her bladder all night, and now, with a sigh that sounds almost human, she lets go. The sound is startling in the stillness. Warm, steaming, splashing onto straw. And someone, usually young Alfred, the apprentice, will have to deal with that later. But not yet. Not quite yet. Alfred himself is still half asleep, leaning against the doorframe, watching the sky lighten by imperceptible degrees. He's 16, gangly, always hungry. His job is to milk Bessie, and he hates it. Not because it's hard, though it is, but because Bessie hates him. She has a way of shifting her weight just when his hands are full, or flicking her tail across his face at the exact wrong moment, or, on particularly spiteful mornings, stepping on his foot. He's been apprenticed to Osric, who owns Bessie and 3 other cows, and is therefore one of the wealthier men in the village. It's a good position. It means regular meals and the promise of learning a trade, but it also means early mornings and the constant low-level anxiety that comes from being responsible for animals worth more than you could earn in 10 years. Alfred yawns so wide, his jaw cracks. He stretches. He contemplates going back inside and sleeping for another hour, but he knows that won't happen. Osric will be up soon, checking that Alfred is doing what he's supposed to be doing. And Alfred learned early that disappointing Osric is not worth the momentary pleasure of extra sleep. So he straightens his tunic, runs his fingers through his hair in a futile attempt to flatten it, and heads toward the barn. The women are already moving, their work starting earlier than anyone else's. There's bread to be made, though not from scratch, not every day. Yesterday's loaf, hard now, will be soaked in weak ale or milk to soften it. There's porridge to stir, made from whatever grain is left in the sack. Barley, usually. Sometimes oats, if the harvest was good. Wulfgar's wife is called Edgith. She's the same age as her husband, but looks older, which is the way of things. Childbearing ages you. So does the endless work of running a household with no modern conveniences. She has strong arms and a strong back and a stronger will, and she needs all 3 to keep her family fed and clothed and more or less intact. She's already at the hearth, blowing on the embers from last night's fire. They glow sullenly, reluctant to commit to full flame. She feeds them twigs and dry grass until they remember how to burn. Smoke curls up, some of it finding the hole in the roof, some of it filling the room until everyone's eyes water. This is the part of the day when time feels elastic, stretched thin, because nothing has really happened yet. It's all potential. The rooster has crowed, yes, but the sun hasn't risen. The day hasn't claimed anyone yet. There's still a chance, however small, that it might be different, that something might change, but it won't. It never does. The children are the last to wake, dragged from sleep by their mother's voices, or the smell of food, or the simple fact that the house is no longer warm enough to justify staying in bed. They stumble out, rubbing their eyes, complaining in that universal way children have complained since the beginning of time. There's Leofric, the eldest at 10, who's reached the age where he's expected to help with real work and resents every moment of it. There's Ethelflaed, 8, who's already learning the endless tasks of women's work. Spinning, weaving, cooking, cleaning, caring for younger siblings. And there's little Godric, who's 6, and still young enough that no one expects much from him beyond staying out of the way. They emerge from the corner where they sleep, wrapped in a single blanket that's more holes than wool at this point, and immediately start bickering. He pushed me. Did not. Did too. Edgith doesn't even look up from the fire. Both of you, stop. Get dressed. They continue bickering, but in lower voices, knowing better than to push their mother this early in the morning. And outside, the village continues its slow unfurling. Someone is already at the well, hauling up the first bucket of the day. The water is shockingly cold, so cold it makes your teeth ache just to touch it. But it's clean, or clean enough, and that's what matters. The woman at the well is Mildrith. She's younger than Edgith, only 23, but she's already on her 4th pregnancy. The first 2 children survived, the 3rd didn't. This 4th one is making her sick in the mornings, which is why she's up early, trying to get her chores done before the nausea gets too bad. She lowers the bucket, waits for the splash, hauls it up hand over hand. The rope burns her palms, but she's used to it. She fills her pitcher, balances it on her hip, and heads back home. On the way, she passes Brother Aelfric, the odd monk from the nearby monastery who sometimes stays in the village. He's standing very still, looking at a tree. Just looking, not moving, not speaking, just looking. "Good morning, brother," Mildrith says politely. He doesn't respond. She's not sure if he even heard her. Brother Aelfric is like that, lost in his own world. People say he talks to trees, and maybe he does. He's harmless anyway. Strange, but harmless. She continues home, already thinking through the tasks of the day. Bread to bake, butter to churn, children to feed, clothes to wash, though that might wait another day. Husband to feed when he comes in from the fields, animals to tend, garden to weed, cheese to turn, ale to brew. The list is endless. It's always endless. And yet, somehow, it all gets done. Not well, perhaps. Not to the standard of a wealthy household with servants, but done. Sufficient. Enough to keep everyone alive another day. The light is changing now, not dramatically, just a gradual lessening of the dark. Grey becoming less grey, shapes emerging from shadow. The outline of the church tower, the curve of the path, the silhouettes of people moving, each to their own small task, each a thread in the fabric of the day. Father Ealdred is already awake, has been for hours. Priests keep the canonical hours, the rhythm of prayers that structure the day. Matins in the deep night, lauds at dawn, prime as morning begins, terce at mid-morning, sext at noon, none in the afternoon, vespers at dusk, and compline before bed. It's exhausting, maintaining this schedule, but it's what he signed up for when he took orders. He's in the church now, saying the morning prayers to an empty room. He doesn't mind the emptiness. Prayer is between him and God doesn't require an audience. His voice echoes in the stone space. Domine, labia mea aperis, et os meum annuntiabit laudem tuam. Lord, open my lips, and my mouth shall declare your praise. The Latin flows easily after decades of repetition. He doesn't have to think about the words anymore. His mouth knows them. His body knows them. It's a kind of muscle memory, this praying. When he finishes, he sits in silence for a moment, enjoying the peace before the day really begins. Soon, there will be people with problems, disputes to settle, sins to hear, advice to give. But for now, it's just him and the cold stone, and the slowly brightening windows. And somewhere, in the back of everyone's mind, is the knowledge that this, all of this, will happen again tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. But for now, in this liminal space between sleep and waking, there's a strange kind of peace, a quiet acceptance, because this is the rhythm, this is the life, and if it's not exciting, well, it's also not terrifying. It's known, it's safe. It's the sound of Bessie chewing her cud, and the smell of smoke, and the feel of cold earth under bare feet. This is dawn in a medieval village, not the dawn of heroes or legends, just the dawn of people, ordinary people, doing ordinary things. Again, the sun breaks the horizon, though you can't really see it through the clouds, but you can feel it. The darkness lifts by the smallest degree. The world goes from black to dark grey to regular grey. It's not much, but it's enough. Day has begun. Pause here with me, friend. It's Peter again, your companion on this timeless stroll. Picture me as that weary villager, rising in the chill, my back aching from years of toil, much like yours in today's world. I recall a dawn in my own life after losing a dear friend when I dragged myself up, thinking, why bother? But in that repetition, like Wolfgar's, I found resilience. As your teacher in life's quiet lessons, know this. Each dawn isn't a burden. It's a gift, a chance to weave meaning into the ordinary, hand in hand with those we love. The porridge is always the same. Let's be clear about that. Not metaphorically, not almost. Exactly the same. Grey, thick, with little lumps of barley that never quite soften no matter how long you cook them. It sits in the wooden bowl, steaming slightly, looking less like food and more like a grudge, but it's warm. And when your body is cold and your stomach is empty and the day ahead promises nothing but labor, warm is enough. Warm is everything. The family gathers around the hearth, not because it's cozy, but because it's the only place that isn't freezing. They sit on stools or benches worn smooth by generations of sitting. The fire smokes more than it should, because the chimney, if you can call it that, is just a hole in the roof, and the wind has opinions about which direction the smoke should go. Wolfgar mutters a quick grace. It's rote, mechanical, the words blurred together by repetition. Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts which we are about to receive from thy bounty, through Christ our Lord. Amen. But he means it, or at least he means the idea of it, that there's something bigger than this bowl, this morning, this endless sameness. The children eat quickly, slurping, making noises that would scandalize anyone with table manners, but no one here cares. Speed is what matters, because once you've eaten, you're expected to work. Edgith, meanwhile, is already moving. She's reheating yesterday's bread, laying the hard slices near the fire to warm them through. The bread is dense, dark, the kind that makes your jaw tired just chewing it. It's made from maslin, a mixture of wheat and rye, because pure wheat flour is expensive and pure rye is hard to digest. The compromise works, mostly. There's no butter. Butter is for special occasions, or for selling at market if you have a cow generous enough to produce extra. What they have instead is a small crock of dripping, the rendered fat from the last pig they slaughtered. It's not appealing, exactly, but spread thin on warm bread, it provides fat and salt and a richness that makes the meal feel less austere. But there's something else, a small crock of something fermented. Vegetables, probably. Cabbage or turnips, preserved in brine. They're sour, aggressively so, but they cut through the blandness of the porridge. And sourness, in a world of bland, is a gift. It wakes up your mouth, reminds you that food can be more than just fuel. The taste of medieval peasant food is something modern people struggle to imagine. It's not that it's bad, exactly. It's that it's so limited. The same ingredients, prepared the same ways, day after day. Barley and oats and rye, peas and beans and cabbage, onions and leeks and the occasional bit of meat, though meat is rare enough that when it appears, it's an event. They don't have tomatoes or potatoes or corn because those haven't been brought from the New World yet. They don't have sugar except in the form of honey, which is expensive. They don't have pepper or cinnamon or any of the exotic spices that are making merchants rich in London and Paris. What they have are garden herbs, parsley, sage, thyme, mint, and if you're lucky, a bit of garlic. The result is food that's nourishing but monotonous. It keeps you alive. It gives you the energy to work. But it doesn't excite. It doesn't delight. It's just there, a necessity, like sleep or breathing. Hygiene, such as it is, happens in fragments. There's a basin near the door filled with cold water from the well. You splash your face, gasp at the shock of it, rub your eyes. The water is so cold, it feels like it's burning. Your skin goes numb for a moment, then starts to tingle as the blood returns. You might, if you're particularly fastidious, use a cloth to wipe under your arms. But that's about it. Full washing, the kind where you immerse your body in water, that's a rare event. It requires heating water, which requires firewood, which requires labor. And labor is a currency you spend carefully. Teeth are cleaned with a frayed twig. Willow, usually, or hazel. You chew the end until it's soft and fibrous, then scrub your teeth with it. It's not effective by modern standards. There's no fluoride, no abrasive paste, but it's something. It removes the worst of the debris, and it leaves your mouth tasting faintly of wood and bitterness, which is better than the taste of sleep and last night's ale. Some people, the more fastidious ones, will also scrub their teeth with a mixture of salt and sage. The salt is abrasive. The sage is supposed to be cleansing. Whether it actually works is debatable, but it feels like you're doing something, and sometimes that's enough. no one bathes. Not today, not this week, maybe not this month. Because bathing is an event. It requires heating gallons of water, which takes hours. It requires a tub, which most people don't own. It requires privacy, which is impossible in a one-room house where 3 generations share the same space. So you wash your hands and face and call it done. You change your undertunic every few weeks when it gets too grimy to ignore. You air out your outer clothes by hanging them near the fire. And you accept that you smell. Everyone smells. It's just part of being human. The house smells like smoke and porridge and unwashed wool. There's an earthiness to it, a weight. It's the smell of people living too close together, sharing air and space, and the warmth of each other's bodies because there's no alternative. It's the smell of the straw on the floor, which is changed periodically, but never often enough. It's the smell of the animals on the other side of the thin wall, cow manure and sheep lanolin, and the specific musk of chickens. But here's the thing. They don't notice. Not really, because this is the only air they know. You only notice a smell when it changes, when it's different. And this is just the background hum of existence. Alfred finishes his porridge and slumps in the corner, hoping no one will notice him. But Osric does. He always does. His eyes are sharp, his voice sharper. Bessie won't milk herself, boy. Alfred groans. Not loudly, just a small sound of existential weariness. But he gets up. Because what's the alternative? He's apprenticed. He's bound. For the next 7 years, until he's 23, his time belongs to Osric. He'll learn the trade of dairying, and in exchange, Osric will feed him and house him, and, presumably, not beat him too often. It's a good arrangement as these things go. Osric is fair, if demanding. And the alternative, working his father's small plot of land, offers no more freedom and considerably less food. Outside, Bessie is waiting. She knows the routine as well as he does. She's standing in her stall, tail flicking, eyes half closed in that bored bovine way. Alfred fetches the stool and the bucket. He sits. He reaches. Bessie shifts. Just enough to be annoying. Her hoof comes down, not on his foot this time, but close enough to make a point. "Come on, girl," Alfred mutters. "We do this every day. Can't you just cooperate?" Bessie doesn't answer. She's a cow, but if she could answer, Alfred suspects she'd say something sarcastic. He starts the rhythmic squeeze and pull, the motion that will define the next 20 minutes of his life. His hands are cold, which makes it harder. Milk is warm when it comes out, warmer than you'd expect, and the heat feels good on his frozen fingers. The milk comes in thin streams, hitting the wooden bucket with a sound that's almost musical. Plink, plink, plink. It's meditative in a way. The kind of task where your mind can wander because your hands know what to do without thinking. And wander it does. Alfred thinks about the girl from the next farm over, Cinneberg. She smiled at him last week at the well. Or maybe it wasn't a smile. Maybe she was just squinting into the sun. It's hard to tell. He replays the moment, polishing it in his memory until it gleams. In his imagination, he's charming and confident. He says something witty. She laughs. Her laugh is like music. She touches his arm. They walk together. Bessie flicks her tail directly into his face. He sputters, spitting out cow hair. "All right, I get it," he says. "Focus on the milk." The bucket is half full when Osric appears in the doorway of the barn, checking on progress. He doesn't say anything, just nods, satisfied, and disappears again. That's Osric's way. Silent approval is the best you can hope for. Loud approval doesn't exist. Loud disapproval, on the other hand, is very much a possibility. Back inside the house, Ed Gith is tidying, which doesn't mean much in a house with a dirt floor and walls that leak. It means sweeping the straw around, picking up the larger pieces of debris, shaking out the blankets and hanging them near the fire to air. The blankets are wool, heavy, scratchy, and perpetually damp. They smell like sheep and smoke and human sweat. But they're also the difference between sleeping and freezing, so no one complains. Well, the children complain, but children complain about everything, so it doesn't count. Wool is miraculous stuff when you think about it. It keeps you warm even when it's wet. It's durable. It's renewable. You can shear the same sheep year after year. And it can be worked into everything from coarse blankets to fine clothing, depending on the quality of the fleece and the skill of the spinner. But it's also itchy, profoundly, maddeningly itchy. Which is why everyone wears a linen undertunic next to their skin. Linen is smoother, cooler, and easier to wash. The wool goes on top for warmth and durability. It's a system that works, as long as you don't think too hard about the fact that you're essentially wrapped in sheep hair. Wulfgar has already left for the fields. He didn't say much. He never does in the morning. He just pulled on his boots, if you can call them that, more like leather wraps tied around his feet with twine, and headed out. His shoulders were already hunched, anticipating the weight of the day. The work that waits for him is unrelenting. Even in winter, when there's no planting or harvesting, there's maintenance. Hedges to repair, ditches to dig, tools to mend, firewood to chop, animals to tend. The list never ends. And beyond the physical labor, there's the mental weight, the constant calculation. Do we have enough grain to last until spring? Is the cow producing enough milk? Should we slaughter the pig now or try to keep it alive a bit longer? Every decision has consequences, and the margin for error is razor thin. The younger children are given small tasks. Go check the chickens. Bring in more wood. Stop hitting your brother. They do these things with varying degrees of competence and enthusiasm. Leofric, the eldest, is supposed to be checking the chick ends for eggs, but he's easily distracted. He finds a stick. The stick is shaped like a sword. This is, objectively, the most important discovery of his day. He spends the next 10 minutes fighting an invisible enemy, making whooshing sounds with his mouth. His sister, Ethelflaed, watches him with the scornful superiority of someone 2 years younger, but infinitely more mature. "You're supposed to be getting eggs." "I am," he lies, mid-swing. He parries an invisible thrust, riposts brilliantly, delivers the killing blow. The invisible enemy dies dramatically. Mother's going to be angry. Mother's always angry. That's because you never do what you're told. He abandons his invisible foe and makes a face at her. She makes a worse face back. This is sibling communication in its purest form. Eventually, Mother's voice cuts through the air like an axe. Leofric. He abandons the stick sword with genuine regret and runs to the chicken coop, feeling vaguely martyred. The chickens are not cooperative. They never are. They're scattered around the coop, pecking at things, making the soft muttering sounds that chickens make when they're content. When Leofric enters, they eye him suspiciously, as if he's an intruder rather than the person who feeds them every day. He reaches into the nesting boxes, feeling around for eggs. The first box is empty. The second has one egg, still warm. The third has 2 eggs, and one very indignant hen who pecks at his hand when he reaches past her. Ow, stupid chicken. The chicken clucks smugly. He gathers what he can find, which is never as many as Mother wants, and trudges back inside, cradling the eggs carefully so they don't break. 3 eggs. It's not much, but it's something. By now, the house has achieved a kind of low-level chaos. People moving past each other in the small space. Someone looking for a tool. Someone else complaining about the cold. Godric crying because Leofric took his piece of bread, even though Leofric swears he didn't. It's not dramatic. It's not tragic. It's just the friction of life. The small irritations that pile up like kindling. But underneath the bickering and the complaints, there's something else. A rhythm, a knowing. Everyone here knows their part. They might grumble, but they do it. Because this is how the household survives. The household is the basic economic unit of medieval society. Not the individual. Not even the nuclear family, really, but the household, which includes not just parents and children, but grandparents if they're still alive, unmarried aunts and uncles, apprentices, servants if you're wealthy enough, and sometimes even lodgers who pay rent in labor rather than coin. Everyone contributes according to their ability. The men work the fields. The women manage the house, the garden, the dairy, the brewing, the spinning and weaving. The children help wherever they can, starting with simple tasks and gradually taking on more complex ones as they grow. It's not always fair. The women, arguably, work harder than anyone because their work never stops. Men come in from the fields and rest. Women finish the field work and then cook dinner and then clean up and then spin wool by the fire until they literally can't keep their eyes open. But it's how the system works. And in a world where survival depends on everyone pulling their weight, there's not much room for questioning the fairness of it all. The fire is fed. The children are fed. The animals are fed. And slowly, incrementally, the household gears up for the day that's already started without asking permission. Outside, the village is waking fully now. You can hear the sound of other families, other mornings, blending together into a kind of collective murmur. The clang of a pot, the bark of a dog, the shout of someone who just stepped in something unpleasant. And over it all, the church bell rings. Not for any particular reason, just to mark the hour. Prime. the first hour of the day, to remind everyone that time is passing, whether they're ready or not. The porridge is gone. The bowls are stacked. Alfred has survived another encounter with Bessie, and the day, in all its mundane inevitability, has officially begun. This is the grumble of the hearth, not the stuff of songs or stories, just the quiet, relentless machinery of survival, the daily battle against cold and hunger and chaos, the small victories of a fire that lights, a child who obeys, a cow who gives milk without too much fuss. It's not glamorous, but it's real, and in its own way, it's heroic. Because getting up every day and doing the same hard work, knowing you'll have to do it again tomorrow, that takes a kind of courage that's easy to overlook. The well is where the village comes to drink and to talk and to pretend they're not talking when they absolutely are. It sits at the center of the village, or near enough. A circle of stones worn smooth by centuries of buckets scraping against them. The rope is old but still strong, replaced section by section as it frays. The bucket is wooden, bound with iron hoops, heavy even when empty. The water below is dark, cold, and allegedly blessed, though no one's entirely sure by whom or when. There's a story about a saint passing through 300 years ago and blessing all the wells in the region, but the details are hazy and might be entirely made up. Still, the water is clean. And in a world where clean water is rarer than you'd think, that makes it sacred in a very practical way. The women arrive first. They always do, with their wooden buckets and their yokes and their expressions of studied neutrality, because the well is a stage and everyone knows it. You don't just come here to fetch water. You come to see and be seen, to gauge the health of your neighbors by the color of their faces and the speed of their step, to hear news, to share news, to invent news if there isn't any. This morning, it's Osgith who gets there first. She's old, older than anyone can quite remember, with a face like a walnut and a voice like gravel being sifted. Her back is permanently bent from decades of labor, and she moves slowly, but she still insists on fetching her own water every morning. It's a point of pride. She lowers her bucket with the practiced ease of someone who's done this 10,000 times. The rope creaks. The bucket splashes, the sound echoing up from the depths. She hauls it up, hand over hand, and the water sloshes over the rim, cold enough to make your bones ache just looking at it. "Cold today," she announces, to no one in particular. Her breath fogs in the air. Mildred arrives next, moving more slowly than usual because of the pregnancy. She's carrying a smaller bucket than normal, a concession to her condition that she resents but can't avoid. Her face has the pale, slightly greenish tinge of someone fighting nausea. "Cold, every day," Mildred replies, setting her bucket down with a thud. "Colder yesterday. Was it? I think so. This is the opening gambit. The small talk that isn't really small, because it's testing the waters, so to speak. Seeing if today is a day for real conversation or just the ritual exchange of nothings. Wulfhild is the third to arrive, and she tips the balance. Wulfhild is the one who always knows things. How she knows them is unclear. She doesn't travel. She doesn't read because she can't read. She just absorbs information from the air like a sponge. She hears fragments of conversations and pieces them together into complete stories. She notices who visits whom and when, and draws conclusions. "Did you hear about Aelfric's goat?" she says, not bothering with the weather. Osgiliath and Mildrith lean in, not obviously, but enough. "What about it?" "Died." A pause. This is significant. A goat is not nothing. A goat is milk and cheese, and eventually meat. A goat represents wealth in a way that's hard for modern people to understand. Losing a goat can be the difference between a comfortable winter and a hungry one. How? Wulfhild shrugs. No one knows. Just died. Found it in the morning. Young goat. 3 years old. Prime. That's strange. Very strange. There's a moment of silence for the goat, who none of them have ever seen, but whose death they now collectively mourn with the appropriate level of concern. They're also calculating. If Aelfric has lost a goat, he might need to borrow, or sell something, or ask for help. This is information that might become useful later. "Milk was good, though," Osgiliath says. "I bought from him last month." "Was it?" "Very good. Rich." They nod, filing this information away. Good milk, dead goat, strange circumstances. And then Edgith arrives, and the conversation shifts into a higher gear. Edgith is married to Osric, the Reeve, which gives her a certain social gravity. Not quite nobility, but adjacent to authority. Her opinions carry weight. Her approval matters. "Cold this morning," Edgith says, because even the Reeve's wife has to acknowledge the weather. It's the social glue that holds the village together. "We were just saying," Osgiliath agrees. "Did you hear about the goat?" "We heard. Sad business." "Very sad." They observe another moment of respectful silence. Then Edgith lowers her voice slightly, which is the signal that the real conversation is about to begin. "I saw Cinneberg yesterday, by the south field." Wulfhild's eyes light up. "Did you?" "With Edric." "Ah." That one syllable contains multitudes. It means, "I see. I understand. I will now make my own assumptions and spread them as fact." Because Cinneberg and Edric being together in a field is news. It's the kind of news that leads somewhere. "They were just talking," Edgith adds, which of course means they were doing more than talking, or at least thinking about doing more than talking. You don't add "just" unless you want people to think there's more to the story. "Young people," Osgiliath says, with the weary wisdom of someone who was young once and remembers exactly what that entails. "Do you think he'll ask her father?" "I think he'd be a fool not to. She's a good girl, hard worker, strong back, good hips." This is how marriage prospects are discussed. Not in terms of love or compatibility, though those things matter too in their way, but primarily in terms of practical value. Can she work? Can she bear children? Is her family respectable? Does she have a dowry? Romance exists, but it's a luxury, a pleasant addition to an arrangement that's primarily economic. Two families joining resources, two sets of hands becoming four, the possibility of children to work the land and care for aging parents. His mother won't like it, Wulfhild says. Why not? She wanted him to marry the miller's daughter. She says that about everyone. True. They laugh, a little meanly, but not without affection. Everyone knows Edric's mother. She's protective to the point of smother. No girl is ever good enough for her son. But eventually, he'll marry someone, and she'll have to accept it. The children, meanwhile, are running around the well, playing some game that involves a lot of shouting and occasional shoving. They're supposed to be helping, carrying smaller buckets or watching the babies, but they're easily distracted. One of them, Godric, keeps trying to drop pebbles into the well to hear the splash. Stop that, Mildred snaps. You'll anger the spirits. Godric looks skeptical, but stops anyway, because you don't mess with spirits. Everyone knows that. Wells are liminal spaces, thresholds between the world above and the world below. They need to be treated with respect. There are stories, of course. Stories of wells that dried up because someone offended them. Stories of wishes granted if you drop a pin just right. Stories of things that live down in the dark, waiting. No one really believes the stories, but no one really disbelieves them either. It's safer to be respectful. The water keeps coming up, bucket after bucket. The women fill their containers, balance them on their heads or hips or shoulders, depending on their strength and the size of the load. But they don't leave quickly. They linger, because the well is a break, a moment of something other than work, a chance to stand in the communal space and feel part of something larger than their own small repetitive lives. And the talk continues. It always does. About the weather, about the goat, about Cinneberg and Edric, about Father Ildred, who forgot the words to a prayer last Sunday and had to start over, which was embarrassing for him, but secretly amusing for everyone else. He's getting old, Osgith says, not unkindly. Aren't we all? Mildred replies. Speak for yourself. I'm in my prime. This gets a laugh. Osgith is 70 if she's a day. Her prime is long past. But there's something admirable about her refusal to admit it. The conversation shifts to Brother Aelfric, who's been seen talking to trees again. It's not natural, Wulfhild says. He's a holy man. They're allowed to be strange. There's strange, and then there's strange. What do you think he says to them? The trees? Yes, probably praise. That's what monks do, isn't it? Pray. But to trees, maybe he thinks they can hear God better than we can. What with their roots going down and their branches going up? This is surprisingly theological for a conversation at the well, but no one questions it. Religion is a part of life, woven into every aspect of existence. You pray when you wake up. You pray before you eat. You pray before you sleep. You pray when you're scared or sick or hoping for good weather. The prayers aren't always formal. Sometimes they're just moments of acknowledgement, a quick sign of the cross, a muttered "God willing," a sense that you're not alone in the universe, that someone or something is watching, hopefully with benevolence. More women arrive, the well gets crowded, the noise level rises. The younger women cluster together, the older women form their own group. The social hierarchy of the village plays out in miniature around this stone circle. There's Hild, who makes the best cheese in 3 villages and knows it. There's Leofwin, whose husband beats her but no one talks about it, because what would you say? There's Jormungith, who buried 2 husbands and is actively looking for a third, because being a widow without sons is precarious. Each of them has a story. Each of them carries burdens and joys in equal measure. And the well is where those stories intersect, where the private becomes public, where the individual becomes communal. It's not always kind, this communal space. Reputations are built and demolished over the course of a single conversation. Mistakes are remembered for generations. That girl who got pregnant before marriage 30 years ago, people still talk about it. That boy who stole from the church offering, his children feel the weight of it. But it's also where help is organized, where you learn that your neighbor is struggling and you make a plan to assist, where food is shared and labor is exchanged, and the web of mutual obligation that keeps the village alive is maintained. My daughter needs help with the spinning tomorrow, one woman says. I can come in the afternoon, another replies. I'll bring bread. No need. I'll bring it anyway. This is how it works. Small acts of generosity that expect nothing immediate in return, but that build up over time into a network of debt and credit that's more valuable than any coin. The sun is climbing now, pale and weak behind the clouds. The morning is passing. The water has been fetched, but no one's in a hurry to leave. Because once you leave the well, you go back to being alone in your own house with your own problems. Here, briefly, you're part of something. Finally, slowly, the gathering begins to disperse. The women drift back to their homes, walking carefully so as not to spill, their conversations trailing behind them like threads, and the well sits quiet for a while. Just a circle of stones, just water in the dark, waiting for the next group, the next conversation, the next small essential ritual that keeps the village stitched together. This is the murmured secret of the well. It's not really about the water. It's about the gathering, the ritual, the assurance that you're not alone in the tedium, that everyone else is also hauling water and gossiping about goats and wondering why Brother Elfric talks to trees. And in a world where life is hard and repetitive and often lonely, that assurance is worth more than gold. Let me step in as Peter, your steadfast friend sharing this tale. I've stood by many a well in life, figurative ones, like coffee shops or park benches where secrets flow. Once, as a young man lost in a big city, I overheard strangers' chatter that sparked a lifelong friendship. Like these women, we find fun in whispers, not wonders. As your guide, remember, gossip isn't idle. It's the thread binding us, turning loneliness into belonging. Lean on me. Let's cherish these connections. In the manor house, where the walls are stone and the floors are covered with rushes instead of dirt, Bertram the scribe is having a very bad morning. Not catastrophically bad. Nothing's on fire. No one's dying. But bad in the small, exhausting way that makes you question every decision that led you to this moment. He's sitting at a table near the window, which is just an opening in the wall with a wooden shutter that doesn't quite close. The light is good here, when there is light, which there isn't much of because winter sun is stingy and the sky is the color of wet wool. In front of him is a piece of parchment, expensive, precious, made from the skin of a sheep that died for the privilege of being written on. The preparation took weeks, soaking, scraping, stretching, treating with lime. The result is a surface smooth enough to write on, thin enough to be flexible, durable enough to last centuries if properly cared for. You don't waste parchment. You don't make mistakes. Bertram makes a mistake. He's copying a legal document, something tedious about boundaries and obligations and who owes what to whom. It's the kind of document that exists in multiples, that needs to be copied exactly, that will be referred to years from now when someone disputes a property line or claims they never agreed to pay that rent. The Latin is dense. The handwriting of the original is atrocious, and his fingers are so cold they're barely functional. The room has a fireplace, but it's not lit because firewood is expensive, and he's just a scribe, not important enough to justify the cost. He dips his quill in the ink. He begins to write. The letters form black and spidery. He's using a formal script, the kind that takes concentration to produce consistently. And then, halfway through a word, the quill splits, the ink blots, and there, on the precious parchment, is a stain. He stares at it. The stain stares back. He closes his eyes and breathes slowly through his nose, the way the monk who taught him said to do when facing temptation or frustration. It doesn't help. The stain is still there when he opens his eyes. He picks up his scraping knife. It's a small blade, sharp, designed specifically for this purpose. Carefully, painstakingly, he scrapes away the blot. The parchment thins. If he's not careful, he'll scrape right through it, and then he'll have to start over. And there isn't another piece of parchment, and he'll have to explain to the steward why the document isn't finished. The steward is not a patient man. He's thin and sour and has the demeanor of someone who's never enjoyed a moment of his life and resents anyone who has. His favorite phrase is, "That's not good enough," which he delivers with a tone that suggests you're personally disappointing, not just him, but God. Bertram scrapes. He blows away the scrapings. He examines the spot. It's passable. Barely. You can still see a shadow where the ink was, but if you don't look too closely, you might not notice. He trims a new quill. This is an art in itself. The angle of the cut determines the width of the line, the flexibility of the point. Too sharp, and it scratches. Too dull, and the letters are fat and ugly. He's cut thousands of quills in his 15 years as a scribe, and he's still not entirely consistent. He dips the new quill in the ink. He writes. The letters are shaky now because his hand is tense. He can feel the mistake waiting to happen, hovering just out of sight, ready to pounce. The ink is made from oak galls, those strange round growths that form on oak trees when wasps lay their eggs in them. You grind the galls into powder, mix with iron sulfate and gum arabic, add water. The result is a brown-black liquid that flows reasonably well and becomes permanent once it dries. But it has to be the right consistency. Too thin and it runs and blots. Too thick and it clogs the quill. Bertram mixed this batch himself yesterday and he thought he got it right. But now he's not sure. And then he sneezes. Not a polite sneeze. A full-body, explosive sneeze that sends a spray of ink across the page. He freezes. The page is ruined. Completely, irreparably ruined. He lays his head on the table and wishes, briefly but intensely, for death. From the doorway, a voice. Going well. I see. It's Edmund, another scribe, younger, more cheerful, unburdened by the weight of existential despair. He's holding a cup of something warm, probably ale, and grinning in a way that makes Bertram want to commit violence. Go away, Bertram mutters into the table. Can't. I need the ink. Bertram lifts his head just enough to glare. You're using all of it. You're always using all of it. That's because I write more than you. You write faster. That's not the same thing. Faster and more. I'm just better at this than you are. Edmund is 23 and insufferably confident. He came to the manor 2 years ago and immediately established himself as the favourite. His handwriting is beautiful, his Latin is impeccable, and he never seems to make mistakes. Bertram hates him with the pure, burning hatred that only a colleague can inspire. I hope you get leprosy, Bertram says without heat. That's not very Christian of you. I'll repent later. Edmund laughs and grabs the inkpot, his good humour unassailable. He wanders off, humming tunelessly. Bertram watches him go and feels a surge of envy so intense it's almost physical. He sits up. He takes the ruined parchment and folds it carefully. It can't be used for its original purpose, but maybe he can use the back for practice. Waste not, as they say. Even ruined sheepskin has value. He fetches a new piece of parchment from the locked chest. This one is smaller, less pristine, but it'll do. He starts again. The morning wears on. The light shifts, what little there is of it. His back aches from hunching over the table. His eyes burn from squinting at the tiny script. His fingers are cramping, and he's only halfway done. This is the thing about being a scribe. It looks easy. You're sitting down. You're not hauling rocks or ploughing fields. But it's its own kind of hell. The precision required, the consequences of error, the monotony of copying the same phrases over and over and over. Bertram has been a scribe for 15 years. He started at age 15, when his father, who was also a scribe, decided that at least one of his sons should follow in his footsteps. The others could work the land. But Bertram, who was small and sickly and not much good at physical labor, would learn letters. He's copied contracts, letters, psalms, accounts, inventories. He's written thousands of words he didn't compose, in a language he barely speaks, for people who will never know his name. When future scholars study these documents, they'll wonder about the content, the history, the people involved. They won't spare a thought for the scribe who sat in a cold room, fighting with quills and ink and his own limitations to create them. And yet, there's something about it when it goes well. When the quill glides and the letters flow and the parchment fills with neat, even lines. There's a satisfaction, a sense of order imposed on chaos, a small monument to precision in a world that's mostly mud and shouting. But today is not one of those days. He sneezes again. This time, mercifully, the page is spared. He wipes his nose on his sleeve and keeps writing. The room is quiet, except for the scratch of quills. Edmund is back now, working at the other end of the table. There's also Roger, an older scribe who never talks to anyone, and young Thomas, who's still an apprentice and makes more mistakes than he gets right, but is improving. Outside, the sounds of the manor drift in. Footsteps, voices, the clang of pots from the kitchen, the bark of the Lord's hunting dogs, the distant sound of someone shouting orders. The manor is a complex operation. There are servants and cooks and grooms and groundskeepers and guards. There are stores to manage and accounts to keep and disputes to settle. And it all creates endless paperwork, which is where the scribes come in. Bertram tunes it all out. He's developed this ability over the years to narrow his focus to the point of the quill and nothing else, to let the world shrink until it's just him and the ink and the slow, deliberate act of making marks that mean something. Hours pass, or maybe minutes. Time is strange when you're doing something this tedious. It stretches and compresses. You look up and it's midday, and you have no idea where the morning went. Finally, he reaches the end of the document. He sets down the quill. He flexes his fingers, which have frozen into a claw shape. He reads over what he's written, checking for errors, though by this point his eyes are so tired he could miss an entire paragraph and not notice. It's done. It's not perfect, but it's done. He stands, stretches, feels his spine pop in 3 places. He walks to the window and looks out at the village below. People moving, working, living their small, repetitive lives. And he thinks, this is it. This is what we do. We wake up, we work. We make small things that matter to almost no one. And then we do it again. It's not inspiring, but it's true. He turns back to the table. There's more to copy. There's always more to copy. But first, he's going to find Edmund and steal his ale. It's the principle of the thing. The sun, pale and distant, reaches its highest point. Not that it matters much. The warmth it provides is theoretical, a memory of better seasons. But the village recognizes noon anyway. Not by clock, because clocks are for monasteries and rich merchants, but by the angle of shadows and the bell from the church tower and the deep animal knowledge that it's time to stop. The church bell rings. For sext, the 6th hour, the midday prayer. The sound carries across the fields, a reminder that even labor must pause, that even work has its limits. In the fields, men straighten their backs with groans that sound older than their years. They wipe sweat despite the cold, because labor generates its own heat, and set down their tools with the reverence of someone placing a weapon after battle. This is the pause, the necessary halt before the body simply quits. Wulfgar finds a spot under a bare tree and sits heavily, his legs stretched out in front of him. His boots, such as they are caked with mud that's already drying into a crust. He doesn't bother to clean them. What's the point? He'll be back in the field in an hour. From his sack, he pulls the midday meal. Bread, cheese, a bit of dried meat if he's lucky, though today he's not. Just bread and cheese, and both are hard enough to require serious chewing. He eats slowly, not because he's savouring it, but because his jaw is tired and his teeth are questionable. One of his molars has been aching for weeks, a dull throb that never quite goes away. He should probably have it pulled, but the thought of the pain and the loss of another tooth keeps him putting it off. The bread is dense, dark, with bits of something that might be grain or might be grit. You never know with bread. The miller is supposed to sift the flour properly, but sometimes bits of stone from the millstone get ground in. You bite down wrong and crack a tooth, and there's not much you can do about it. The cheese is sharp, almost bitter, the kind that makes you reach for water even though there isn't any. It's made from sheep's milk, which gives it a distinct flavour that some people love and others tolerate. Wulfgar falls somewhere in between. He eats it because it's food, not because he enjoys it. Around him, other men are doing the same, sitting, eating, not talking much. What's there to say? They've worked together all morning in sight of each other, doing the same things they do every day. Conversation feels like more effort than it's worth. But there's companionship in the silence, in the shared exhaustion, in the knowledge that everyone here is enduring the same grinding monotony and somehow, collectively, getting through it. One man, Leofstan, lies flat on his back in the grass, eyes closed, hands folded on his chest like a corpse. He's not asleep, just resting, existing without effort for a few precious minutes. Another, Wulfstan, is sharpening his scythe with slow, methodical strokes. The rasp of metal on stone is rhythmic, almost hypnotic. He doesn't need to sharpen it right now. He's already sharpened it twice this week, but it's something to do. Something that feels useful without requiring the kind of exertion that would defeat the purpose of rest. Meanwhile, back in the village, the women are managing their own version of the lull. The midday meal at home is less formal, more chaotic. Children are fed quickly, with whatever's left from breakfast or whatever can be assembled without cooking. Bread? Yes, always bread. Maybe some onions. A bit of cheese if the household is doing well. Eadjith sits on the bench outside the house, the baby on her lap, and eats standing up. because if she sits down properly, she might not get up again. The baby is teething, which means he's been fussy all morning, and her patience is worn thin. Her daughter, Ethelflaed, is inside, attempting to braid her younger sister's hair, which is a disaster because neither of them is particularly skilled, and the younger sister won't sit still. Ow! I'm not even pulling. You're pulling. Eadgith closes her eyes and takes a bite of bread. She chews. She swallows. She does not intervene. Some battles are not worth fighting. The village itself seems to exhale. The frenetic energy of the morning has faded. Now there's a heaviness, a sluggishness, as if everyone is moving through water. This is the time when the exhaustion of the morning meets the dread of the afternoon and creates a strange liminal space. You're too tired to do much, but you know rest is temporary. The afternoon is coming, more work is coming, and your body is already protesting, already cataloguing all the places that hurt. Godric, the child from earlier, is supposed to be helping his mother. Instead, he's found a stick again. This is a different stick. This stick is a spear. He's hunting imaginary boars, creeping through the imaginary forest, which is actually just the gap between two houses. Godric, come here. He ignores her. He's locked in battle with a particularly fierce imaginary boar. The boar is winning. He needs to flank it. He needs... Godric! He sighs the sigh of the deeply put upon and abandons his quest. He trudges over to his mother, who hands him a piece of bread and an onion. Eat. He eats, still half in his imaginary world, chewing absently while his eyes scan the horizon for threats that don't exist. In the manor, the household is having a more elaborate meal. Not elaborate by noble standards, but by village standards, it's a feast. There's pottage, thick and steaming, with actual vegetables visible in it. There's bread that's white, or at least less aggressively brown. There's ale, good ale, not the thin stuff the peasants drink. There's even meat, a bit of salted pork left over from the last slaughter. Bertram is there, along with Edmund and Roger and young Thomas. They eat quickly, efficiently, because their time is valuable and there's always more work. The conversation is minimal. Someone mentions the weather, because of course they do. Someone else mentions a shipment that's late. The steward, sitting at the head of the table, grunts acknowledgement and goes back to eating. The steward's name is Godwin, and he's been managing the manor for 20 years. He knows every field, every debt, every dispute. He knows which peasants can be trusted and which need watching. He knows the price of grain and the cost of labor and the exact amount of rent each household owes. He's good at his job. He's also deeply, profoundly tired. Not physically, though that too, but mentally. The weight of responsibility, the endless calculations, the constant balancing of the Lord's interests against the villagers' needs. It wears on you after a while. But he doesn't complain. Complaining is weakness. And weakness is something he can't afford. This is the lull at every level of society, the necessary pause, the brief window where the body is allowed to rest, to refuel, before being asked to perform again. But it's not peaceful, not really. Because even while you're resting, you're thinking about what comes next. The field that still needs ploughing, the firewood that needs chopping, the accounts that need tallying, the endless, grinding list of tasks that never gets shorter. And underneath all of it, a kind of low-level anxiety. Because if you rest too long, you won't finish. And if you don't finish, there will be consequences. Not dramatic ones, not punishments, just lack. The crops won't come in. The Lord won't be pleased. The family will go a little hungrier. So the rest is tainted, necessary but insufficient. You sit, you eat, you breathe, but you don't relax. Not really. Leofstan, still flat on his back in the field, opens his eyes and stares at the grey sky. He's 42, which by the standards of the time makes him old. His back hurts in a way that's become constant, a background hum he's learned to ignore. His hands are gnarled, the knuckles swollen from years of gripping tools. He thinks about his father, who worked these same fields, and his father's father, and back and back and back, all of them getting up in the cold, all of them ploughing and planting and harvesting, all of them sitting under this same tree, eating the same bread. It's not a comforting thought, but it's not a despairing one either. It just is. This is what we do. This is what we've always done. This is what our children will do after us. He sits up. He brushes the grass off his tunic. He picks up his scythe. The others see him move and, reluctantly, begin to move too, like a collective decision made without words. The lull is over. The afternoon is here. Edgith finishes her bread. She wipes her mouth on her sleeve. She stands, ignoring the protest in her knees. She goes back inside, where the children are fighting again, and separates them with the weary efficiency of someone who's done this 1,000 times. And in the manner, Bertram drains his cup of ale, wishes it were stronger, and heads back to his table. The parchment is waiting. The quill is waiting. The afternoon is waiting. The village, having paused, begins to move again. Slower now, more reluctant, but moving nonetheless. Because that's what you do. You rest, and then you get back to work. As Peter, your elder companion who's savoured many such lulls, let me share. I once paused mid-journey on a dusty road, exhausted from chasing dreams, and ate a simple meal alone. It taught me, like these villagers, that rest isn't idleness, it's renewal. Imagine me sitting beside you now, hand on your shoulder, saying, "In life's pauses, we rebuild." As your friend, I urge you, embrace them. They're where we find strength for the next step, turning routine into quiet triumph. The afternoon light has a particular quality. It's slanted, golden in summer but thin and cold now, filtering through clouds that never quite break. It makes everything look tired, worn, like the world itself is running out of energy. In the south field, where the earth has been turned and left to rest until spring, two figures are moving, slowly, deliberately, in a way that suggests they're supposed to be working, but aren't entirely committed to the idea. Edric is 22. He's tall, or at least taller than average, with the kind of build that comes from years of farm labor. Strong, but not bulky. Lean. His hair is dark, cut short in a way that's practical rather than fashionable, and his hands are rough, the nails cracked and stained. He's the second son of a freeman, which means he has more prospects than a serf, but fewer than a firstborn. He'll inherit some land, but not much. He'll need to work hard, be smart, marry well. The pressure of this knowledge sits on his shoulders like a physical weight. Cinneberg is 19. She's not beautiful in any classical sense, but she has a face that's easy to look at. Open, warm. Her hair is braided and pinned under a headscarf that's coming loose, which she keeps tucking back with a gesture that's become automatic. She's the daughter of a prosperous villager, which means she brings a decent dowry. Her father has 3 cows, a dozen sheep, and more land than he can work himself. She's been taught all the skills a wife needs: spinning, weaving, brewing, dairying, managing a household. She's valuable. Several young men have expressed interest, but she's here with Edric. They're supposed to be checking the drainage ditches. That's the official reason they're both here. Making sure the winter rains haven't collapsed the sides, that the water is flowing where it's supposed to. But the ditches are fine. They've been fine for weeks. This is not about ditches. They walk side by side, not quite touching, but close enough that the space between them feels charged. Electric, if electricity were a concept they had words for. Cold today, Edric says, which is possibly the least interesting thing he could have said. And he knows it, and he hates himself a little for saying it anyway. Yes, Cinneberg agrees. She glances at him, then away, then back again. They've known each other their entire lives. They grew up in the same village, played the same games, attended the same festivals. But something shifted this past summer. A look that lasted a heartbeat too long. A conversation that went deeper than small talk. And now, every interaction is layered with meaning they're both too shy and too terrified to name. "Do you think it'll snow?" she asks. "Maybe." "My mother says her knee aches, which means snow." "My grandmother says the opposite, that if her knee aches, it won't snow." They both laugh, a little too loudly, because it's not that funny, but they're nervous, and laughter is a release. They reach the end of the field. There's a low stone wall here, half collapsed, that marks the boundary between this land and the next. Edric sits on it. After a moment, Cinneberg sits too, leaving a careful distance between them. The silence stretches, not uncomfortably, but not easily either. It's the kind of silence that demands to be filled, but neither of them knows how. "I saw you at the well yesterday," Edric says finally. "I saw you seeing me." He flushes. "Was I obvious?" "Very." Another silence. This one is worse. He's ruined it. He's been too forward or too awkward or too something. He should leave. He should make an excuse about needing to check the north field and just go. But then she says softly, "I didn't mind." His heart does something complicated in his chest, something that feels like falling and flying at the same time. "I think about you," he blurts out, and immediately regrets it, because that's not how you're supposed to say these things. There's supposed to be poetry, finesse, not just blunt confession like a child admitting to stealing bread. But Cinneberg doesn't laugh. She doesn't recoil. She just looks at him with those steady, warm eyes and says, "I think about you too." And there it is. The thing they've been dancing around for months, finally spoken aloud. Edric doesn't know what to do with his hands. They're suddenly enormous and useless. He clasps them together, then unclasps them, then rests them on his knees. "What do we do now?" he asks. She smiles. It's a small smile, but it transforms her face. "I don't know." They sit in this uncertainty for a while. The wind picks up, cold and sharp, and Cinneberg shivers. Without thinking, Edric moves closer, not quite touching, but close enough that his body blocks some of the wind. She doesn't move away. This is the moment, the one that will matter when they're old and telling their grandchildren how they fell in love. It's not dramatic. There's no music, no perfectly chosen words, just two people sitting on a stone wall in a cold field, trying to figure out how to bridge the tiny, terrifying gap between them. "Cinneberg," he starts, and then stops, because he's not sure what comes next. "Yes? Would you, if your father agrees, would you?" He's making a mess of this. He knows the words. He's rehearsed them 100 times in his head. But now that the moment is here, they're all tangled up. She takes pity on him. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" "Yes, maybe. I don't know." "Then yes." "Yes? Yes." He stares at her. "But I didn't even—" "You were going to ask if I would marry you. The answer is yes. If my father agrees. And if your mother doesn't hate me." "She doesn't hate you. She thinks she says you're sensible." Cinneberg laughs. High praise. And just like that, the tension breaks. They're both laughing now, giddy with relief and terror, and the enormity of what they've just decided. Edric wants to kiss her. He's wanted to kiss her for months. But he doesn't know if he's allowed, if it's too soon, if she'd be offended. While he's thinking about this, Cinneberg leans over and kisses him. Just a quick press of lips, chaste and brief, but enough to make his entire body light up, like he's been struck by lightning. She pulls back, blushing furiously. "Was that okay?" "Yes," he manages. "Very okay." They sit in silence again, but this time it's different, comfortable. The kind of silence where you don't need to fill the space with words because the presence is enough. The afternoon is fading. Soon they'll need to head back. There will be questions about why they took so long checking ditches. There will be conversations with parents, negotiations, arrangements. The machinery of marriage will grind into motion, slow and bureaucratic. Marriage in medieval society is not primarily about love. It's about alliance, economics, property, two families joining resources. But that doesn't mean love is absent. It's just not the starting point. Ideally, it grows over time. You marry someone suitable, and then you learn to love them, or at least to live with them peacefully. But sometimes, if you're lucky, The love comes first, and that makes everything else easier. We should go back, Cinnaberg says eventually. We should. Neither of them moves. In a minute, Edric says. In a minute, she agrees. And they sit there, watching the light fade, feeling the cold seep into their bones, and not caring at all. This is what it means to be young and in love in a medieval village. Not grand romance, not sweeping gestures. Just this. Two people on a stone wall, holding hands, building a future out of nothing but hope and willingness. Here, as Peter, your life-seasoned ally, I recall my own awkward courtship, stumbling words on a similar stone bench, heart pounding like Edric's. Oh, the folly of youth. But from that came decades of shared joys and storms. Imagine me as the village elder pulling you aside. Love isn't fireworks. It's the quiet gaze that endures. As your brother in experience, treasure these tentative steps. They're the foundation of lives intertwined, where fun lies in building together against the odds. The church bell rings for vespers, and the village begins its slow migration toward the sound. Not everyone goes. Attendance is expected, but enforcement is lax, especially on a day that's been long and cold and exhausting. But enough people go that it feels like a gathering, a collective exhale before the night truly begins. The church is small, stone, drafty, the kind of building that stood for 2 centuries and will stand for 2 more, not because it's particularly well built, but because stone endures and there's nowhere else for it to go. The roof leaks in 3 places. The floor is uneven, worn smooth by generations of feet. There's a persistent smell of damp and old incense, and something else, something musty that might be rot or might just be age. But it's sacred space. You feel it when you enter, not because of any mystical quality, but because this is the place where the village comes together outside of work, where births are blessed and deaths are mourned, and everything in between is acknowledged, however briefly. The walls are thick, which keeps some of the cold out but also traps the damp. The windows are small, just narrow slits really, designed more for defense than light. The church was built in a time when raiders were a real concern, when even God's house needed to double as a fortress. Father Ildred is already at the altar, preparing for the service. He's older, his hair more grey than not, and he has the distracted air of someone who's forgotten what he came into the room for. But he's beloved in the way that harmless, slightly confused people often are. He never judges. He never condemns. He just exists, a gentle presence in a hard world. The villagers file in, taking their usual spots. There's no assigned seating, but everyone knows where they belong. The men on one side, the women on the other, the children wherever they can be, corralled, which is never quite where they're supposed to be. Osgith takes her place near the front, her back straight despite her age. She's been attending this church for 70 years. She was baptized here, married here, will be buried here. The building is as much a part of her as her own bones. Mildred is wrestling with the baby, who has decided that right now, this moment, is the perfect time to be fussy. He's squirming and whimpering and threatening to escalate to full-blown screaming. She bounces him, shushes him, prays that he'll settle before Father Ealdred starts. Wulfhild and Edgith are whispering about something, heads close together, until Edgith's husband gives her a look, and she straightens up, primly attentive. The church fills slowly. Wulfgar and his family, Osric and his household, including Alfred, who's trying not to yawn. Leofstan moving stiffly because his back is killing him. Jormungandr, the widow who always sits in the same spot and always arrives early. Father Ealdred clears his throat. The murmuring dies down, mostly. He begins the service in Latin, the words flowing with practiced ease, even if half the congregation doesn't understand them. It doesn't matter. The ritual is the point, the rhythm, the reminder that there's something larger than the daily grind of survival, that your life, however small and repetitive, is part of something eternal. Deus in adiutorium meum intende, he begins. God, come to my assistance. Domine, ad adiuvandum me festina. The congregation responds, those who know the responses. Lord, make haste to help me. The words wash over them, familiar, comforting, like a blanket worn thin but still warm. He gets through the opening prayers without incident. The congregation responds at the appropriate moments, their voices blending into something that's almost musical, if you're generous. The psalms are chanted. Father Ealdred's voice is reedy but steady. Some of the villagers join in, humming along to melodies they've known since childhood, even if they don't know the words. And then, in the middle of a particularly solemn moment, there's a noise from the back of the church. A cluck. Everyone freezes, including Father Ealdred, who stops mid-sentence and looks up, confused. Another cluck, louder this time, indignant. And then, waddling up the center aisle with the confidence of someone who absolutely belongs here, comes a chicken. It's one of Leofric's chickens, though no one knows how it got inside. It's brown, slightly scruffy, and completely unbothered by the sanctity of the space. It stops halfway up the aisle, pecks at something on the floor, decides it's not interesting, and continues its journey. Father Ealdred blinks. The congregation is trying very hard not to laugh. A few of the children are failing spectacularly, their giggles muffled behind their hands. Someone should... Father Ealdred starts, but he's not sure what someone should do. The chicken is now investigating the altar with the curiosity of a tourist. It hops up onto the bottom step, tilts its head, considers the options. Osric, the reeve, stands up with a sigh. He walks calmly up to the chicken, scoops it up under one arm in a practiced motion that suggests this is not his first time removing livestock from inappropriate places. The chicken complains loudly, but doesn't fight much. Osric carries it back down the aisle, deposits it outside, and closes the door firmly. He returns to his seat, his expression unchanged, as if nothing unusual has happened. Father Ealdred composes himself. As I was saying, but the spell is broken. The solemnity has been punctured by poultry. The rest of the service proceeds, but there's an undercurrent of barely suppressed amusement. A few people are still grinning. Leofric is bright red with embarrassment, sinking lower in his seat as if he can disappear into the floor. And yet, there's something lovely about it. The interruption, the reminder that even in sacred space, life intrudes. Messy, ridiculous life that doesn't care about ritual or propriety. It's a moment of levity in a day that's been long and hard. A shared joke that will be retold for weeks, each telling, adding new embellishments until the chicken becomes legendary. A symbol of the village's ability to laugh at itself. Father Ildred finishes the prayers. The congregation rises for the final blessing. He raises his hands and speaks the familiar words. And despite the chicken and the cold and the general absurdity of existence, there's a moment of genuine peace. Benedicat vos omnipotens Deus, Pater et Filius et Spiritus Sanctus. Amen. Go in peace, he says, switching to English for the dismissal. They file out slowly, talking in low voices. The children run ahead, already forgetting the solemnity, already back to being children. The adults linger, exchanging a few words, making plans or just acknowledging each other's presence. Cinneberg and Edric don't look at each other, but they're very aware of each other's presence. Their families are here, watching, and this is not the time or place for public affection. But later, Edric will speak to his father, and his father will speak to Cinneberg's father, and the wheels will begin to turn. The sky is darkening. The day is almost over, but not quite. There's still evening to get through, still supper to prepare and eat, still the winding down that never quite feels complete. Father Ildred locks the church door, though there's nothing valuable inside to steal. The altar cloth is old and patched. The candlesticks are brass, not silver. The chalice is simple, but he locks it anyway, because that's what you do. He stands for a moment, looking out at the village, at the small houses with smoke rising from their roofs, at the people moving in the gathering dusk. He thinks they're good people. Flawed, yes. Prone to gossip and petty squabbles. But good. They endure. They care for each other. They show up even when they're exhausted. And sometimes they bring chickens to church. He smiles to himself and heads home, already looking forward to the simple supper waiting for him, and the quiet evening of prayer and rest that will follow. It happens without warning. One moment, the village is settling into its evening rhythm. Supper is being prepared. Fires are being banked. People are moving toward the end of the day with the slow resignation of those who've done this 1,000 times before. And then the bell rings. Not the church bell. A different bell. Smaller, sharper. The one that hangs near the manor house and is only rung for announcements or emergencies. Everyone stops, looks up, listens. It rings again, insistent. Slowly, people begin to drift toward the sound. Curious, wary, because unexpected bells are never good news. Someone's died. There's been an accident. The Lord has made a decree that will make everyone's life harder. Taxes are going up. There's a war. Plague has been spotted in the next village. The possibilities multiply as people walk, each one imagining the worst. Because in a world where life is precarious, where disaster is always one bad harvest or one disease away, unexpected news is rarely good. But when they gather in the space near the manor, there's no announcement, no grim-faced steward, just a group of men who look excited. Is that the right word? One of them, a farmer named Elfstan, is grinning. He's holding the rope of the bell, still swaying slightly from his enthusiastic ringing. "It's Michaelmas," he shouts. There's a pause. "No, it's not," someone says. Michaelmas was months ago. Everyone knows that. Close enough. And just like that, the tension breaks. Because this isn't a crisis. It's an excuse to stop working, to gather, to do something, anything, other than the grinding routine of daily survival. There's a moment of confusion. Then someone laughs, then someone else. And suddenly, instead of dispersing in relief, people are staying. Because why not? The work is done, or done enough. The evening is long, and here's an opportunity for something different. Someone produces a drum. It's not a good drum. Just a frame with hide stretched over it, probably from a goat that died last winter. But it makes noise, and noise is what's needed. Someone else has ale, not the good stuff. The stuff that's been sitting in a barrel for too long and tastes faintly of mold. But it's ale, and ale is social lubricant. And before anyone quite knows how it happened, there's a festival. Spontaneous, chaotic, the kind of thing that happens when people are too tired to maintain decorum and too desperate for joy to care. The drum beats. Someone starts singing. It's off-key and the words are half forgotten, but it doesn't matter. Others join in, and the collective sound drowns out individual imperfections. Children run wild, delighted by the sudden lack of supervision. They chase each other, shrieking, weaving between adults who are too distracted to tell them to stop. Godric has found yet another stick, and he's leading a charge against an imaginary fortress. Food appears. Not much. Bread, yes, always bread. Someone brings out a wheel of cheese that's been saved for a special occasion, and this apparently qualifies. There's dried fish, tough and salty. A few apples, wrinkled but sweet. Someone's wife produces a pot of pottage that was meant for tomorrow's breakfast. But what the hell? We'll eat it now. It's not a feast, but it feels like one. The transformation is remarkable. People who were exhausted an hour ago are suddenly energized. The prospect of play, of community, of breaking the routine is more invigorating than rest. Elfstan is attempting to dance. He's not good at it. He's stomping and waving his arms in a way that's more enthusiasm than technique. But others join him, and soon there's a circle of people moving in something that might generously be called rhythm. The movements are simple, steps that everyone knows from childhood, from previous festivals, from the collective memory of the village. You don't need formal training. You just need willingness. The ale is passed around, sipped, swallowed, passed again. Inhibitions loosen. Voices get louder. Laughter comes more easily. Godric, the boy with the stick obsession, has found a new stick. This one is a sword again. He's fighting imaginary enemies, narrating his own adventure with the unself-conscious enthusiasm of a 6-year-old. And then I said, "You'll never take me alive." He swings wildly, nearly hits Mildred, who moves just in time and ruffles his hair as he passes. Near the edge of the gathering, the older villagers are sitting on benches, watching the chaos with expressions of fond exasperation. They've seen this before. They know how it will end. With exhaustion and headaches and the renewed realization that life is still hard. But for now, it's nice. The noise, the movement, the sense of something happening outside the usual script. Osgeith is telling a story. It's a story everyone's heard before, about a knight and a goat and a misunderstanding that somehow ended with the knight eating his own boot. The details are fuzzy, the logic questionable, but the way she tells it, with dramatic pauses and exaggerated gestures, makes it new every time. People are laughing. Real, genuine laughter that comes from the belly and leaves you breathless. It's a sound that's been missing from the village, though no one realized it until now. Bertram is here too, standing awkwardly at the edge of the crowd. He's not much of a joiner. He prefers his quiet corner and his quill. But Edmund has dragged him out, shoved a cup of ale into his hand, and refused to let him leave. "Relax," Edmund says. "The parchment will still be there tomorrow." "That's what I'm afraid of," Bertram mutters, but he takes a sip of the ale. It's terrible. Truly, genuinely terrible. He takes another sip. The warmth spreads through his chest, and he feels something loosen inside him. The perpetual tension that lives in his shoulders, the anxiety about making mistakes, the weight of all those unfinished tasks. For a moment, just a moment, he lets it go. Cinneberg and Edric are here, standing together now in a way that's different from before. More open, less hidden. A few people have noticed, are nudging each other, smiling. Romance is always good gossip. Cinneberg's father is watching them, his expression unreadable. He's known this was coming. He's not blind, but seeing it, seeing his daughter with this young man, makes it real in a way that's both thrilling and terrifying. She's growing up, she's leaving, and he's both proud and heartbroken. But that's for later. Right now, he's drinking ale and listening to Osgith's story, and trying not to think too hard about the passage of time. The night deepens. The fire in the center of the gathering grows, fed by whatever wood can be spared. The flames cast dancing shadows, make faces look strange and beautiful. The smoke rises, carrying with it the smell of burning oak and the sound of human laughter. The singing continues, the dancing continues, and for a brief, shining moment, the weight of survival lifts. Not completely. It never does completely, but enough that people can breathe a little easier. This is what they needed. Not rest, exactly, but release. A valve opening to let out the pressure that's been building all day, all week, all year. Someone suggests a game, not a complex game, just a simple one. Toss the stick into the bucket. It's a child's game, really. But the adults play it with fierce concentration, cheering when someone makes it, groaning when someone misses. The children have organized their own game, something that involves a lot of running and screaming and no discernible rules. They're having the time of their lives. Eventually, slowly, people begin to drift away. The children are carried home, protesting sleepily. The adults, feeling the ache and the cold and the accumulated exhaustion of the day, make their excuses. The gathering thins. The fire burns down. The night reclaims the space. But the memory lingers of laughter, of community, of the brief, beautiful absurdity of dancing badly and singing worse and not caring at all. Tomorrow will be the same as today. The work will return. The routine will reassert itself. But tonight, for a little while, they were more than farmers and scribes and mothers and children. They were people, together, and that, in the end, is everything. And now, as Peter wrapping this evening with you like a warm cloak, let's reflect. I've danced at such impromptu feasts in my travels, finding joy in chaos. As your mentor, know that fun isn't planned. It's seized in moments of togetherness, turning ordinary nights into legends of the heart. The village is quiet now, not silent, never quite silent, but as close as it gets. The last embers of the festival fire are dying, glowing red in the darkness like watchful eyes. Someone will cover them with ash in the morning, scattering them so no stray spark catches the thatch. But for now, they glow, a last reminder of warmth. Bessie is settled in her stall, chewing slowly, her eyes half closed. Elfwine, her keeper, stops by for his nightly check. He doesn't need to. She's fine. She's always fine. But he does it anyway, running a hand along her flank, checking her water, making sure she's comfortable. "Good night, girl," he whispers. She doesn't respond, of course, but there's comfort in the ritual, in the touching, in the knowledge that tomorrow he'll do this again. And the day after that, and the day after that. Inside the houses, families are preparing for sleep. Children are tucked into corners, wrapped in whatever blankets can be spared. They protest, as children do, claiming they're not tired even as their eyes droop. Leofric is the hardest to settle. He's still buzzing from the festival, from the running and the playing, and the general excitement of an evening that was different. His mother has to threaten him 3 times before he finally lies down, and even then, he's squirming. "Tell me a story," he demands. "Not tonight. Sleep." "Please?" She sighs, because she's tired, and there are still tasks to do. But he's asking with those big eyes and that hopeful expression, and she can't quite refuse. "One story, then sleep." She tells him the same story she tells every night, about a farmer who outsmarted a fox. The details change slightly each time, but the core is the same. The fox is clever. The farmer is cleverer. Justice prevails. It's not a great story, but it's comforting, familiar. And by the time she reaches the end, Leofric's eyes are closed, his breathing even. She tucks the blanket around him, kisses his forehead, and moves on to the next task. Mothers hum softly. Not songs exactly, just sound. the kind of wordless comfort that transcends language. A reminder that someone is here, someone is watching, someone cares. Fathers check the doors, make sure the fire is banked properly, do the small tasks that keep disaster at bay. It's not dramatic work, it's maintenance. But maintenance is what keeps life from falling apart. Wolfgar checks the latch on the door for the third time. It's secure. It was secure the first 2 times. But checking one more time doesn't hurt. He looks at his sleeping family. His wife, curled on her side, already snoring softly. His children, tangled together in the corner, a mass of limbs and blankets. His aged mother in her own corner, her breathing raspy but steady. This is what he works for. This is what every long day in the field is about. Keeping them safe, keeping them fed, keeping them alive. It's not glamorous, but it's enough. The night sounds begin. The wind, always the wind, moving through the gaps in walls, rustling the thatch. The distant hoot of an owl. The shuffle of some animal, probably a rat, moving through the straw on the floor. And from the houses, the human sounds. Snoring, coughing, the creak of someone shifting position. A murmured word from a dream. A baby crying briefly before being soothed back to sleep. Cinneberg lies awake, her heart still racing from the evening, from the conversation with her father that went better than expected, from the knowledge that her life is about to change in ways both terrifying and wonderful. Her father listened. He asked questions. He looked at her seriously and said, "Are you sure?" And she said, "Yes, she's sure. There will be negotiations, dowry discussions, arrangements about where they'll live, whose land they'll work, all the practical details that turn a romance into a marriage. But tonight, she's just happy. Nervous, yes. Scared, yes. But happy. Edric, in his own house, is also awake, staring at the darkness, feeling the weight of responsibility and the lightness of joy in equal measure. He's going to be married. He's going to have a wife, a household, children, probably, a future that extends beyond himself. It's what he wanted. But now that it's real, it's terrifying. What if he's not a good husband? What if he can't provide? What if something goes wrong? But then he thinks of Cinneberg's smile, her laugh, the way she kissed him on that stone wall. And the fear recedes, just a little. They'll figure it out, together. Bertram is already asleep, sprawled across his narrow bed in the manor, still in his ink-stained tunic, too tired to even undress. He's dreaming of quills and parchment and endless documents that need copying. Even in his dreams, he can't escape. Father Ealdred is praying, quietly, words only he and God can hear. He prays for the village, for the crops, for the souls of the departed. He prays for wisdom and patience and the strength to keep doing this job day after day, even when he forgets the words and chickens interrupt the service. And at the end, almost as an afterthought, he thanks God for chickens, for the reminder that life is absurd and sacred, and often both at once. The stars, What few can be seen through the clouds look down on this small village, on these small lives. They've looked down on countless villages, countless lives, and will continue long after these particular people are gone. But tonight, right now, these lives matter. These routines matter. Because this is how humans survive. Not through grand gestures or heroic acts, but through the daily, repetitive, exhausting work of showing up, of caring for each other, of finding small joys in the midst of hardship. The well will still be there tomorrow. The rooster will still crow. Bessie will still be stubborn. The porridge will still be the same. And that's okay. Because this is life, not the life of legends, not the life of stories that get written down and remembered. Just life, human life, with all its boredom and beauty and everything in between. The village sleeps, the night deepens, and somewhere, in the dark, time continues its slow, patient march toward dawn. When morning comes, it will all begin again. The waking, the working, the wondering if there's more to existence than this endless repetition. And the answer, whispered by the wind through the thatch, is both yes and no. No, because this is all there is. This is the substance of life, stripped of illusion. Work and rest, and work again. The cycle that never ends. But also, yes, because within that repetition, there are these moments. A smile exchanged at the well, a child's laughter, the warmth of a hand held in the dark, the taste of ale shared with neighbors, the simple satisfaction of a task completed, the quiet pride of surviving another day. These medieval villages didn't have our luxuries. No screens to distract them from loneliness. No constant entertainment to fill the void. No illusion that happiness was just one purchase, one experience, one achievement away. What they had was each other, and the knowledge, bone deep and unshakable, that this was enough, had to be enough, because there was nothing else. And perhaps that's the secret we've lost in our age of abundance. The understanding that contentment doesn't come from having more. It comes from needing less. From finding meaning, not in novelty, but in repetition. Not in the spectacular, but in the mundane. The rooster will crow tomorrow. Bessie will need milking. The porridge will be grey and lumpy. The well will gather its usual crowd. The fields will demand their labour. And life will continue, one unremarkable day after another. But within those days, there will be moments worth living for. A joke shared, a burden lightened, a hand reaching out in the dark, a future taking shape on a stone wall, a chicken wandering into church. The small rebellions against meaninglessness, the tiny victories over despair. This is what they understood, our medieval ancestors. That life doesn't have to be extraordinary to matter. That showing up is itself a kind of heroism. That there's grace in the grinding routine, if you know how to look for it. So as you drift towards sleep, listening to these words, I want you to remember something. You are not so different from them. Your struggles, though they wear different clothes, are the same struggles. The loneliness, the exhaustion, the wondering if this is all there is, the fear that you're not enough, the hope fragile but persistent, that tomorrow might be different. But you are enough. The life you're living, with all its repetition and routine, matters. The small things you do, the showing up, the trying again, the continuing despite exhaustion, those are not failures. They're the substance of a life well lived. And when you wake tomorrow and face another day that looks much like yesterday, remember the villagers. Remember that they did this. Day after day, year after year, generation after generation. They endured. They found joy. They built lives worth living from the simplest materials. You can too. The fire burns low. The darkness is complete. And in that darkness, there is rest. Deep, dreamless rest. The kind that comes from a day fully lived, however ordinary. Sleep now. Let the rhythm of their lives carry you into stillness. Let the knowledge that you are part of this ancient pattern, this endless cycle of waking and working and resting, bring you peace. Tomorrow the rooster will crow, but that's tomorrow's concern. Tonight there is only this, the quiet, the dark, the slow unwinding of breath, the letting go. And in the letting go, you are not alone. You never were. The village sleeps. The stars keep watch. And somewhere between here and there, between now and then, between waking and sleeping, you find what they found. Not happiness exactly, not escape, just peace. The kind that comes from accepting that this simple, repetitive, beautiful, terrible, ordinary life is enough. It always was. Good night. Sleep well. And when you wake, may you carry with you something they knew. That showing up is enough. That trying is enough. That being here, breathing this air, sharing this moment, that is enough. You are enough. Rest now. The village keeps its vigil. And so, in our own way, do we, until dawn comes again, as it always does, as it always has, as it always will. Sleep. And now, like a dear old friend sitting by your bedside to wish you good night, Peter bids you farewell. At an age that has seen many dawns and dusks, I've come to realize something. Life's strangest joy does not come from fleeing its natural rhythm, but from staying and embracing it. One late afternoon, I sat by a fireside, just like those villagers of old. I thought of loves that were lost and battles that were won. And suddenly, it dawned on me. Those simple people were my true teachers. And now, they can be yours as well. So tomorrow, walk with their simple wisdom. Find delight in the most ordinary things each day. For it is in those very moments that we truly live out the grand adventure called being human. I sleep deeply and know that I am still here, guiding you through the long night.